She grew up treated as invisible, the cleaner's daughter, ignored in the halls of a high-tech mansion where every second was monitored by cameras. But when 12 nannies fled in terror and the billionaire offered a fortune for anyone who could care for his children, it was she, a 13-year-old girl with an old notebook and a piece of charcoal, who uncovered the terrifying secret hidden within the walls. And when the system finally fell silent, the most powerful man in the city understood he had been blind all along. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave it in the comments and subscribe to the channel for thrilling stories every day. Hit the bell so you don't miss a single one. The Imperial Gardens development looked like a magazine illustration: manicured lawns, marble fountains, white walls that reflected the sun like mirrors. At the heart of that perfect setting stood Augusto Ferrazzi's mansion, 3 stories of tinted glass, brushed steel, and cutting-edge technology. Every room was equipped with motion sensors, high-definition cameras, directional microphones, and facial recognition algorithms. Augusto had built an empire selling child surveillance systems to wealthy families worldwide. His promise was simple and seductive: protect every second of your child's childhood. But inside that technological fortress, something was deeply wrong. Since the death of Helena, his wife, in a car accident 2 years prior, twins Tomas and Leah had transformed. Once smiling and outgoing children, they were now silent figures with vacant eyes, wandering the halls like little ghosts. And the house seemed to have fallen ill with them. Doors locked themselves. Lights flickered without explanation. Voices echoed through the smart speakers, voices imitating the nannies, the staff, even Helena's voice. 12 nannies had tried to care for the twins. All of them fled. The first lasted 3 days. She reported that in the middle of the night she heard someone calling her name in her own voice. The cameras showed nothing. The second nanny found all the twins' toys arranged in a circle in the center of the room, forming a pattern she swore wasn't there before she went to sleep. The third woke up locked in her own room, the electronic lock flashing red. The fourth, fifth, and sixth recounted variations of the same terror: sounds, shadows, presences. Augusto increased the salary with each failure. He doubled it, tripled it, even offered 100,000 reais a month. Nothing worked. The women left crying, vowing never to return, and some even sought psychologists, convinced they were losing their minds. Meanwhile, on the ground floor, Dandara was polishing the marble floor. She was a black woman in her early 40s, slender, with hands marked by work and eyes that held both weariness and resolve. She had been working at the Ferraz mansion for 5 years, always discreet, always punctual. She arrived at 6 in the morning and left at 4 in the afternoon, taking with her an empty lunchbox and her intact dignity. Augusto barely knew her last name. To him, Dandara was just part of the invisible machinery that kept his life running. What he didn't know was that Dandara brought her daughter with her. Solange was 13, with dark skin, curly hair pulled back in a low bun, and a worn-out notebook she never put down. While her mother cleaned, Solange sat in a corner of the side garden, drawing with a piece of charcoal she'd found near an abandoned barbecue grill. She drew trees, faces, geometric patterns. Sometimes she just watched. The movement of the leaves, the flight of birds, the reflection of light on the mansion's windows. She heard everything. She heard the nannies crying on the phone. She heard Tomas's muffled cries during his nighttime fits. She heard Leah humming alone in her room, always the same incomplete melody. She also heard the strange noises coming from the walls, clicks, electronic whispers, echoes of old conversations. One day in June, when the 12th nanny ran out of the mansion without even grabbing her bag, Solange was sitting near the fountain. Tomas and Leah saw her through the second-floor window. They came down the stairs silently, barefoot, and stopped a few feet from her. "Are you scared of the house?" Leah asked, her voice thin and direct. Solange looked up from her notebook. "No," she replied. Tomas took a step forward. Why? Because houses don't do harm. They just repeat what someone put inside them. The twins exchanged a look. Something in that answer calmed them. That night, Augusto Ferraz walked into the kitchen and found Dandara washing dishes. He was visibly exhausted, with deep circles under his eyes and a day's stubble. Dandara, he said, his voice raspy, do you have children? One daughter. Does she know how to take care of kids? Dandara turned off the faucet and turned slowly. She knows how to listen, she replied. Augusto frowned. I need someone to stay with the twins, just for a few days, until I find another nanny. I'll pay well. Dandara hesitated. She looked toward the window, where Solange was sitting outside, drawing by the streetlight. She can try, but I can't promise anything. Augusto nodded, too exhausted to question further, and so, without ceremony, Solange became the 13th caregiver at the Ferraz mansion. No one imagined that in less than a week she would uncover the secret that terrified that house, and would forever change the lives of everyone inside. Solange started the next day. There was no contract, no uniform, no formal instructions. Augusto simply said, be with them. Don't let them get hurt. If there's any problem, call me. And he disappeared into his third-floor office, where he spent most of his time locked away, monitoring clients' cameras around the world. The girl entered the mansion with her usual notebook tucked under her arm and a small backpack on her back. Tomas and Leah were sitting on the living room sofa, watching a cartoon in silence. They didn't turn when she entered. Solange didn't try to introduce herself formally. She simply sat on the floor, a few feet from them, and opened her notebook. She began to draw what she saw: the crystal chandelier, the bookshelf filled with books no one read, the distorted reflection of the TV on the floor's surface. After a few minutes, Leah turned her head. What are you drawing? The room. Why? Because it's beautiful, and also because I want to understand how it works. Tomas turned off the TV. How does it work? How the sounds move in here? How the light hits things? How you two stay quiet even when everything is loud? Leah blinked, confused. Everything is quiet. Solange shook her head slowly. It's not. There's a hum coming from that wall, and a click that repeats every 15 seconds over there by the stairs. The twins fell silent. So Tomas sat up. You hear it too? It wasn't a question. Solange closed her notebook. I do. And I want to know where it's coming from. For the next 3 days, Solange shadowed the twins like a silent ghost. She didn't give orders. She didn't impose schedules. She just watched, took notes, and asked questions. When did it start? After Mom died, Leah replied, her voice flat. What happens at night? We hear her, Tomas said. Her voice, calling us. But when we go to look, no one's there. And the nannies? They hear their own voices. Everyone gets confused. Solange jotted it all down. At night, when Dandara left, she stayed. She slept on a cot in the room next to the twins, the door ajar. And that's how, on the third night, she finally heard it. 2 in the morning. A whisper. Tomas. Leah. Come here. The voice was soft, feminine, laced with an artificial sweetness. It came from all directions at once, the ceiling, the walls, the floor. Solange got up slowly. She walked down the dark hallway following the sound. It led her to a discreet door at the end of the second-floor hallway, a door she'd never seen open. She turned the doorknob, locked. But beside it, there was a small numeric keypad built into the wall. Solange went back to the room, grabbed her notebook and began to write. Patterns, timings, frequencies, sounds. For 2 full days, she mapped every odd noise in the house, every flickering light, every door that locked itself. And then she realized it was all synchronized. The events weren't random, they were programmed. On the 5th day, she asked to see the security system. Augusto, surprised, led her to the control room on the 3rd floor, a room lined with screens, cables, servers, and flashing LED panels. It was the technological heart of the mansion. "What do you want to know?" he asked, suspicious. "How many cameras are in the house?" 143. "And microphones?" 86. Solange walked slowly among the screens. Each displayed a different angle of the mansion. Bedrooms, hallways, the garden, the kitchen. And what do they record? Everything, audio, video, motion. It's stored for 90 days. And then? The system automatically overwrites. Solange stopped in front of a screen showing the second-floor hallway. "What if someone configured the system to play old recordings?" Augusto frowned. "What do you mean? If someone programmed the house to repeat recorded sounds, like voices, would the house obey?" The silence that followed was heavy. Augusto slowly sat down in front of the main console. His fingers trembled as he typed commands. Screen after screen he opened logs, records, audio playback histories, and then he saw it. Hundreds of old audio files were being played randomly through the house's smart speakers. Voices recorded months earlier, conversations, calls, laughter, and Helena's voice, his dead wife. The system had been configured to play snippets of her recordings, calling the children, singing, talking at specific times, creating the illusion of a presence. Augusto turned pale. "Who did this?" Solange didn't answer. She simply pointed to a line in the log. The user who had configured the system was admin principal, Augusto, himself, but he didn't remember doing it. "It was right after the accident," Solange murmured. "You must have programmed it so you wouldn't forget her voice, but you forgot you'd done it." Silent tears began to stream down the billionaire's face. The mansion wasn't haunted, it was trapped in automated grief, and Solange, the invisible girl, had deciphered the code of sorrow. Augusto Ferraz stood frozen before the screens, his hands on the keyboard, his eyes fixed on the records he'd created without realizing it. He had programmed the house to perpetuate Helena, to keep her digitally alive, repeating her voice, her calls, her presence. But what was meant to be a comfort had become a sonic prison. Solange remained standing, watching. There was no judgment in her gaze, only a quiet, almost ancestral understanding. She knew what it was like to lose someone. She knew what it was like to try to hold on to what was already gone. "The system is in a loop," she said, breaking the silence. "It plays the recordings whenever it detects movement in the hallways at night. That's why the nannies heard their own voices. The system recorded them during the day and played them back at night, mixing them with your wife's old audio." Augusto ran a hand over his face. I don't even remember doing this. You did it in the first few days after the accident. It's all logged here." Solange pointed to a sequence of commands dated 2 years ago, entered at 3 in the morning, an hour when the billionaire likely wasn't sleeping, numbed by grief. He took a deep breath. "So it was all my fault." "It wasn't fault," Solange corrected. "It was longing. But the house doesn't know the difference." Augusto looked at her with an expression that mingled astonishment and something close to shame. This 13-year-old girl, the housekeeper's daughter, was uncovering something that dozens of specialized technicians hadn't been able to identify. "Can you turn it off?" he asked, his voice weak. Solange shook her head. "I can. But first I need to understand something." "What? Why is the door at the end of the hallway always locked?" Augusto's face hardened. "That's Helena's room. No one goes in there." "Do the twins know?" "No. Then they think their mother is trapped in there." The impact of that sentence was like a punch. Augusto stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back with a dry scrape. "They never said that. They don't need to. I've seen the drawings they make. There's always a closed door. And there's always someone on the other side." Augusto clenched his fists. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't find the words, because he knew she was right. That night, Solange didn't go home with her mother. She stayed at the mansion with Augusto's permission, as he was visibly shaken. Dandara hesitated, but she trusted her daughter. She knew Solange was capable of taking care of herself, and perhaps even this broken place. At 9 o'clock, the twins were already in bed. Solange sat between the two beds, her notebook on her lap. "Can I ask a question?" Leah said, looking at the ceiling. "You can. Do you think our mom is in the house?" Solange thought before answering. "I think her love is, but she's not trapped here. She's already gone." Tomas turned onto his side. "Then why do we still hear her?" "Because someone left her voice recorded, and the house kept playing it. But it's not her, it's just an echo." "Echo hurts," Leah murmured. "It does," Solange agreed, "but it can stop." "How?" "By teaching the house to hear something else." In the dead of night, Solange returned to the control room. She carried a small tape recorder she'd borrowed from Dandara, an old cassette player her mother used to use for recording church sermons. She plugged the recorder into the central system, following the logic of the cables and ports she'd observed earlier. She didn't know how to code, but she understood patterns. She understood connections, and then she recorded. She sang softly, alone in the room full of machines, a song Dandara used to sing to her when she was little. "Lullaby of St. John, that calms the wind and the heart. Sleep in peace, my dear, my brother, for the night is gentle and the day will come." It was a simple, old melody, passed down through generations of women in Dandara's family. It had no known author. It was just a lullaby imbued with comfort and protection. Solange replaced the programmed audio files with Helena's voice. One by one, patiently, she erased the echoes of the past and inserted the song. When she finished, it was already 4 in the morning. She unplugged the recorder, saved the changes, and went to sleep. The next morning, something had changed. Tomas and Leah woke up without screaming. There were no nightmares, no voices, just the soft sound of a song they didn't know, but that soothed them like a hug. Augusto came downstairs and found the three of them sitting at the kitchen table having coffee. Solange had made toast with butter. The twins ate in silence, but there was a new lightness in the air. "What did you do?" Augusto asked, his voice hoarse with restrained emotion. "I changed the sounds. The house plays something else now." "What plays?" "Something that calms, something that doesn't hurt." Augusto sat down slowly. "And her voice?" "I erased it." He closed his eyes. A tear rolled down his cheek. "Thank you." Solange just nodded, but she knew there was still one last thing to do, and that would be the hardest of all. For 3 days, the Faraz mansion experienced an unprecedented peace. The noises stopped, the lights quit flickering, the doors stopped locking themselves. Tomas and Leah began sleeping through the night, lulled by the gentle song Solange had recorded, which the system now played at a very low volume, almost imperceptible, like the house's own breath. Augusto watched it all with a mixture of relief and bewilderment. He had hired engineers, child psychologists, trauma specialists. He had invested fortunes in technological solutions. And in the end, it was a 13-year-old girl, armed with nothing but a worn notebook and sharp intuition, who had deciphered the enigma. But Solange knew the work wasn't complete. There was a wound that wouldn't heal with silence alone. There was a door that needed to be opened. On the 4th morning at breakfast, Leah asked, "Solange, why can't we go into Mom's room?" The question dropped like a stone into a silent lake. Augusto, who had been reading emails on his tablet, froze. Tomas stopped chewing. Solange carefully placed her cup of milk on the table. "Do you want to go in?" "We want to see her things," Tomas said. "Her clothes, her books, the hairbrush she used." "Her perfume," Leah added, her voice thick with emotion. Augusto stood up abruptly. "No!" The word came out harsh, sharp. "That room stays locked." "Why?" Leah insisted, her eyes welling up. "Because." "That's not an answer, Dad." Augusto clenched his fists. His jaw trembled. He wanted to scream, to run, to be anywhere but there, facing those two pairs of childish eyes, demanding something he didn't know how to give. Solange took a deep breath. "Can I say something?" Everyone turned to her. The house was repeating your mother's voice because someone programmed it to, but it wasn't on purpose. It was because someone couldn't let her go. She looked directly at Augusto, and locking her room doesn't bring her back. It just keeps you trapped too. The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Augusto closed his eyes. "I can't," he murmured. "I can't go in there." "Then let them go in." "No." "Why?" "Because if I open that door, it'll be real. It'll be final, and I don't want it to be." Solange stood up slowly. "But it already is, and they know it. And as long as you pretend it's not, they'll keep being haunted." That afternoon, while Augusto locked himself in his study, Solange sat with the twins in the garden. "What do you remember about her?" she asked. Leah thought. She laughed loudly, and she always smelled like vanilla. "She used to read to us before bed," Tomasz added. "Stories about dragons and princesses. And she sang in the shower," Leah said, smiling for the first time. "She sang really badly, but we loved it." Solange smiled too. "Those things are with you. They aren't locked in a room. But we want to see her things." "I know, and you will. It just needs time." But Solange knew time wasn't enough. Sometimes it took courage. That night, Solange did something she hadn't asked permission to do. She waited until midnight, went down to the control room, accessed the security system, and unlocked Helena's bedroom door. She didn't go in. She just opened the door and left it ajar. Then she went back to her mat and slept. Augusto found the door open. He had woken up at 2 in the morning, restless as always, and as he walked down the hall, he saw the sliver of light. His heart pounded. He walked slowly as if approaching an abyss. He pushed the door open. The room was exactly as Helena had left it. The bed was made. The books were stacked on the nightstand. The robe hung on the hook. The perfume sat on the dresser. Augusto stepped inside. He sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to truly cry. Not the contained sob of someone trying to be strong, but the heaving, devastating cry of someone finally admitting loss. He stayed there for almost an hour. When he left, he found Solange sitting in the hallway, leaning against the wall, waiting. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. But something fundamental had broken, and in breaking, it had allowed the light to enter. The next day, Augusto called the twins. "Come with me." He led them to Helena's bedroom door. "You can go in. You can take whatever you want. You can stay as long as you need." Tomas and Leah exchanged a hesitant glance. Then they went inside, and Augusto, for the first time, could see them remembering their mother without feeling like he was betraying her memory. Solange watched from a distance, in silence. Dandara, who had arrived for work, came up to her and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You did something very big," she murmured. "I just helped them open a door," Solange replied. "Sometimes that's what we need," Dandara said. "Someone to remind us that we can." And together, mother and daughter, they remained there, silent witnesses to a healing that was beginning. 2 weeks later, the Ferrers mansion was different. Not because it had changed physically. The cameras were still there, the sensors were still working, the technology remained intact. But something essential had transformed. The house now breathed. Thomas and Leah spent hours in their mother's room, not morbidly, but naturally, like visiting a beloved place. Leah chose a silk scarf Helena used to wear in her hair and started wearing it on her wrist. Thomas picked up one of the storybooks and asked Solange to read, imitating the voice he remembered from his mother. Gradually, Helena's memory stopped being an open wound and became a safe harbor. Augusto, for his part, began dismantling the total surveillance system. He turned off half the cameras. He removed the microphones from the rooms. He stopped monitoring his children's every move. He allowed himself to trust. He finally allowed himself to be a father without being a guard. And Solange, who had entered the mansion as the invisible daughter of the cleaner, was now seen. Augusto called her to his office one July afternoon. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair in front of his desk. Solange sat down, quietly, her notebook in her lap. "I wanted to thank you," Augusto began. "But thank you isn't enough. You did something no one else could. Not with technology, not with money, but with attention, with listening, with intelligence." Solange didn't reply, she just waited. "I want to offer you something, a full scholarship to one of the best sound engineering schools in the country, with housing, food, books, all paid for. And then, if you want, a position at my company, or at any company you choose." He paused. "You have a rare talent, and I want it to be recognized." Solange looked down at the notebook in her lap. Then she raised her eyes. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course. Are you offering this because you think I deserve it, or because you feel guilty?" The brutal sincerity of the question made Augusto lean back in his chair. I don't know." "Then think about it. And when you know, we'll talk again." She stood up and left. Dandara was cleaning the hallway when Solange passed by. "What did he want?" "To offer me a scholarship. And you accepted?" "Not yet." Dandara stopped mopping. "Why not?" "Because I need to be sure it's for the right reason. I don't want charity, I want recognition." Dandara smiled, proud. "You're smarter than I was at your age. I learned from you, Mom." 3 days later, Augusto called Solange again. This time, he wasn't alone. There were 2 people in the room, a man in a suit who introduced himself as the director of a federal technical school, and a woman, a professor of acoustics. "Solange," Augusto said, "I thought about what you said, and you're right. I can't offer something just because I feel guilty. So I've invited these people here to evaluate your work. Truly, without my influence." The director opened a folder. "Miss Solange, Mr. Ferraz showed us the security system logs. We saw how you identified the sound patterns, how you mapped the automatic playback, and how you solved a complex technical problem without prior training." He took off his glasses. "This isn't luck. It's exceptional logical reasoning applied to systems engineering." The professor leaned forward. "And the solution you found, replacing the traumatic audio with a lullaby, demonstrates a deep understanding of emotional acoustics. You didn't just turn off the problem, you transformed it into healing. That's scientific sensitivity." Solange remained silent, processing. "We'd like to offer you a full scholarship in the technical training program for sound engineering and home automation," the director said. "Not as a favor, as an investment in real talent. And afterward," the professor added, "if you wish to continue, there are mentorship programs with federal universities. You'd have guidance, internships, and a clear path." Augusto watched it all in silence. Solange looked at him. "And my mother?" The question took everyone by surprise. "What do you mean?" Augusto asked. "If I accept the scholarship, I'll need to study full-time. My mother won't be able to bring me here anymore. Will she lose her job?" Augusto shook his head, moved. "No, in fact, I'd like to propose something for her too." He turned to Dandara, who was standing discreetly at the door as always. "Dandara, I want to create a wellness program for the employees of companies that use my technology. A division that assesses whether the systems are helping or harming people, and I want you to coordinate it." Dandara blinked, incredulous. "Me? But I'm a cleaner. You're a mother. You're observant. You raised a daughter who sees what no one else does. That tells me you understand people, and that's what I need." Dandara looked at Solange. Her daughter nodded with a small smile. "I accept," Dandara said, her voice firm. "And you?" Augusto asked Solange. The girl took a deep breath. "I accept, but with one condition." "What is it?" "That you dismantle at least half of the remaining cameras in this house. Security is important, but suffocation protects no one. Augusto laughed, for the first time in a long time, a light, genuine laugh. Done. In the months that followed, everyone's lives changed. Solange started vocational school. She discovered her knack for sound patterns wasn't a fluke, it was a skill. She learned about frequencies, reverberations, architectural acoustics, and with each new concept she studied, she realized she'd always known it somehow, just lacked the vocabulary. Dandara took on her new role with quiet dignity. She visited companies, spoke with employees, assessed the psychological impact of surveillance systems, and little by little she began to change policies, to humanize technology. Tomas and Leah started smiling again. Not the forced smiles from before, but the genuine joy of children who could simply be children. They still missed their mom, they always would, but now they carried her memory like a gift, not a curse. And Augusto learned to switch off the monitors, switch off the control, switch off the obsessive need to watch every second. He started having dinner with his children, asking about their day, listening. One evening, as they all ate dinner together, Augusto, the twins, Dandara and Solange, Leah asked, "Dad, do you still miss Mom?" Augusto swallowed hard. "Every day." "Me too, but it hurts less now." "Why?" "Because we can talk about her, and because you're not hiding anymore." Augusto reached out and took his daughter's small hand. "Thank you for bringing me back." Tomas looked at Solange. "She's the one who did it." Everyone turned to the girl. Solange shrugged with genuine shyness. "I just opened a door." "Sometimes that's all we need," Dandara said, echoing the words she'd spoken weeks before. And at that table, surrounded by simple food and real conversation, they all understood something fundamental, that the world's most advanced technology doesn't replace presence, that surveillance isn't protection, that listening is more powerful than control, and that sometimes the ones who save us are precisely the ones we've learned to overlook. 2 years passed. The Ferraz mansion still stood, imposing and gleaming, but now it was filled with laughter. The remaining cameras were few, discreet, used only for external security. Inside, there was room for imperfection, for mess, for life. Tomas and Leah, now 10 years old, raced through the garden with friends. Augusto, who had reduced his workload, spent weekends at home. He'd even adopted a dog, a mutt named Echo, in tribute to the sounds that once haunted the house and were now just a distant memory. Dandara had become a respected figure in the humanized technology sector. She gave talks, advised companies, and always began her presentations with the same phrase: "Before you install a camera, ask yourself, am I protecting or controlling?" And Solange, at 15, was already the brightest student in the sound engineering program. She had designed a sound alert system for communities in landslide-prone areas, a simple, inexpensive device that used specific frequencies to warn residents before tragedies struck. The project won a national award. Universities vied for her future enrollment, but Solange hadn't forgotten where she came from. Every Saturday, she returned to the mansion, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She had coffee with the twins, helped Leah with her math homework, played video games with Tomas, and before leaving, she always spent a few minutes in the garden, drawing in the same worn notebook. One of those Saturdays, Augusto sat beside her. "May I see?" Solange turned the notebook. She was drawing the mansion, but now there were open windows, curtains billowing in the wind, birds perched on the roof. "It looks different," Augusto said. "It looks alive," Solange replied. He smiled. "Thank you for that. You did the hard part. You agreed to change. You showed me it was possible." Solange closed the notebook. "Do you know what I learned, Augusto?" It was the first time she'd called him by his name, without Mr. He noticed, but didn't correct her. It felt right. What? That we build prisons without realizing it. With technology, with fear. with control. And we think we're protecting ourselves, but we're just locking ourselves in. And how do we get out? By letting someone open the door, and by having the courage to walk through. Augusto nodded thoughtfully. You'll go far, Solange. I'm already far. I just know the way back now. That night, after everyone had left, Augusto went up to Helena's old room. He had turned it into an art studio for the twins. The walls were covered with drawings, paintings, collages. The bed had been replaced by work tables. The perfume was no longer on the dresser. Leah had taken it to her own room, where she used it on Sundays in small doses as a ritual of remembrance. Augusto sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and looked around. Helena was no longer there, but her love was transformed, reimagined, alive in another way. He picked up his phone and opened the app that controlled the house's sound system. There was only one recording now, the song Solange had made 2 years before. Saint Juan lullaby that calms the wind and the heart. He pressed play. The soft melody filled the room, gentle as a hug. And for the first time since Helena's death, Augusto felt peace. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of learning to remember without getting lost. It's said that on quiet nights you can still hear that song echoing through the halls of the Ferraz mansion, not as a ghost of the past, but as a reminder of the present, that homes are made of people, not technology, that surveillance doesn't protect as much as presence does, that sometimes those who teach us the deepest lessons are precisely those society has taught us to ignore. And that a 13-year-old girl, armed only with an old notebook and the silent wisdom of someone who learned to listen, can be more powerful than any system in the world. Because in the end, what heals isn't what watches, it's what embraces. So, what did you think of this story? Did it make you reflect on anything? On technology? On listening? On the people we overlook in our daily lives? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which part touched you most, and if you know someone who needs to hear this story. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit subscribe now to get inspiring and emotional stories every day. Ring the bell, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to believe that change is possible. See you in the next story. Until then, remember, never underestimate the power of someone who has learned to listen. A hug, and thank you for being here.